this. So the name Sedet means beautiful in Turkish, and Devgemi is Turkish for Leviathan. Just fun facts. Right. My earliest memory was swimming towards Sedet. She was a beautiful creature to behold. Over the course of the day, her scales transitioned from the same green as new kelp to a shade so black she seemed to draw darkness in from the night itself. Unlike other fish in the sea, her eyes were set forward. She didn't have to have her eyes on the side to worry about predators. They were all her prey. She had a long, square snout that could detect anything for leagues upon leagues. Her mouth was filled with 3 sets of teeth ready to lacerate anything. Her body was long and swiveled through the current like a wave debates its relationship with the coast. She had 2 sets of flippers that she'd thrust in unison to pick up speed for the days she'd chase after the setting sun to the edge of the horizon before it retreated to the security of land like a coward. She cried out to the sun to come back. I was always behind her, eager to see the day when she finally caught it. With her rough side, she had a softness to her. She had a smooth underbelly. I traced down her curves with my forked tongue all the way to the opening between her flippers. It was a space in her made perfectly for me to fit into. She teased me about it too. She'd flip upside down with her belly to the surface and hold her breath. I waited below for her, and as soon as she spun back around, I dashed up and slid into her. She laughed as I caught her. She had this low echo in her voice that made my bones vibrate. She tried to roll away, and I bit into her neck and drew blood. A school of sharks came to investigate, but scurried away when they saw us. We twisted together until we were exhausted. Then we floated, watched only by the moon and stars, her fin in mine, so neither of us could drift away. It was in that perfect moment that we saw a god walking on the water towards us. He looked sad and guilty. That is, as sad and guilty as a cloud with a heart of fire could look. "Sedet, you're glowing," God said. She laughed. "That's just the light of the moon off my scales. No, it's definitely coming from you, within you, something warm and growing." He made polite conversation, asking about how we were and what was new. It was clear he was avoiding something. Maybe if I kept my mouth shut, if I only stayed quiet and agreeable, then he wouldn't have said what was on his mind. Then life might have stayed as it was, but no. And I asked him, "What's wrong?" God took a deep breath and sighed. "I am sorry, Devgemi, but this cannot be." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You and Sedet. It cannot continue on like this." He went on to say that if the 2 of us were permitted to multiply, the world would become overrun with our children. That would interfere with something else I've got planned. "What?" I asked. "I have not made them yet, but they will have domain over the land, air, and sea." "Could you just give them the land and air?" I asked. "No," God said. "You 2 must be separated. I'll give you 1 last day together. I will send someone for you then." Then the cloud floated away. "What are we going to do?" I asked. "A day isn't much time at all." "Maybe we can talk to the sun," Sedet suggested. "We might be able to stall the day. We've never caught up to it before," I said. "We can try," she said. We waited for the sun to rise and met it at the coast. We pleaded with it, but it didn't respond or slow its pace. We thought that maybe it could hear us because it couldn't hear us because we were in the water. We popped our heads above the surface. It was difficult to breathe. Sedet could barely utter a word, let alone belt those powerful vibrations. We followed the sun's curve overhead as it had done before. We swam without stopping. We reached the far shore long before the sun got there, asking one more time, but it hid like a coward beyond the land, and the world went dark. Sedet curled up along the coastline. I coiled around her and listened to her heartbeat. And then I heard something else, something faint, like an echo to her heartbeat, but it wasn't hers. I closed my eyes and listened closer. The rhythm was faster than Sedet's. Why did she have 2? "I can't give it up," she said. "Not now." "Where can we go?" I asked. "Well, I have an idea, but I feel it might be the coward's way out." "We can't give ourselves up," I said. "No," she said. "We go into hiding, on the land." "That wilderness? If the sun can hide there, we'll be invisible." "We can barely breathe out there." "It's just enough to get by," she said. We can stay by the coast and hide when God comes around. What other chance do we have? We just have to keep moving and hope that God isn't as fast as the sun. We stuck close to the coast so we could breathe when we needed to, and then ducked away to the land when we saw God. It was working out until I caught the smell of something sulfuric emanating from behind us. The burning was so intense that I could smell it from under the water. I looked back, and there was the angel of death hovering over the surface. It had a cloud body like God, only smaller. A bent, pale fin sprouted from the cloud. At the end of the fin were tendrils, like a cuttlefish wrapped around something shiny like volcanic glass. It curved like a nautilus shell floating in the fire from the sun. We dashed to the shoreline and dragged ourselves onto the land. The sand and rocks scraped against our soft bellies. I was behind Sedette as she pushed on against the pain, leaving behind a trail of blood. We can't go on like this, I said. Sedette lifted herself up onto her 4 flippers. Try this. I hoisted myself up. At least now our trails of blood were smaller and spaced out. I could still smell the angel of death behind us. We found a cave and ducked into the shadows. The angel of death hovered in front of the cave. We held our breath. He was close. He might see where we were and it'd all be over. I nudged Sedette behind me. If the angel did see us, I'd keep him distracted so she could get away. But the angel of death moved down the coast and we breathed a sigh of relief. We figured he wouldn't expect us to go further inland. We imagined more rocks and sand, but were lucky enough to come up to a grassy field. It was easier to walk on, but still hurt. We didn't like being out in the open like that, so we kept on going, hoping we'd come across another cave. Worst of all, neither of us had been away from the water for that long. We were thirsty. Over the hill, we saw a herd of large creatures gathered around a small pond. They had lifted themselves onto their flippers too. They must have been doing it for a long time because they looked thick and sturdy. They had small tails in the back and a long one in the front. They used the long one to drink from the pond and grab the grass and stuff it into their mouth. Their diets must have changed once they made it to land, too, because they had flat teeth in their mouth and 2 longer ones extended in the way that reminded me of what the angel of death held when I spotted him underwater. Should we try and get the water with those behemoths around, I asked. Sedette panted. I'm so thirsty. They might be working with the angel of death, I said. Maybe these are the creatures God planned to have take over the land, sea, and air, I said. There are a lot of them. Oh, she said. There are a lot of them, I said. I don't want to chance it. I think it's too late for that, she said. Why? One's coming our way. One of the behemoths galloped towards us. We tried to run, but didn't have the coordination to properly flee. Hello there, it called out. We stopped and looked back at it. It seems friendly, Sedette whispered. Are you hungry? It asked. Thirsty? Our eyes widened and we nodded. The behemoth led us to the pond. The others parted aside for us. We ducked our heads in the water and took big gulps. I wish we could have stayed in there for days, but the behemoths were staring at us, and for good reason too. They had never seen anything like us before. Thank you for this, I said. May I ask you something? Sedette asked as she raised her head from the pool. Go ahead. Well, we spoke with God about a creature that's going to be in command of the sea, land, and air. He said that we wouldn't be able to multiply because of this creature. You seem so kind. I was wondering if you could talk to God about letting us live in the sea. The behemoth laughed, but there was a sadness in his chuckling. I would if I could. I was actually hoping to ask you the same thing. We've heard of this creature too, but we haven't seen them yet. You see, we've been told of our demise too. God told us that we are to be hunted to death by this creature. We figured if we showed it kindness, it might not want to destroy us. We learned that our remains will be hacked up and turned into instruments, jewelry, furniture, and something called tchotchkes. What's that? It's something worthless to collect dust. The rest of us will be left for the birds to pick away. That's awful, Sedette said. At least we'll be able to multiply to a point, the behemoth said. I'm very sorry that you won't be granted the blessing of children. A small one of them nuzzled against him. I smelled something rotten in the air and froze. I looked to the hill where we came from. The angel of death with his flaming hook was at the crest of the knoll. We've got to get out of here, I said. We can't get away fast enough, Sedette said. Leave it to us, the behemoth offered. We might not be able to stop him, but we can certainly stall him. Thank you for this, I said. We continued on as fast as we could go. I looked back and watched as the behemoth stampeded towards the angel of death. It was brave and courageous and kind of them to put themselves in danger so we could escape. It was a shame that these giants wouldn't inherit the land they deserved. The grass thinned out and was replaced by more rocks. They formed into mountains. They were so massive that we couldn't go around, so we climbed. The further up we went, the more straw we passed. I noticed shadows swirling around us. I looked up. There were black spots against the sun. Did the angel of death bring others with him after getting stalled by the behemoth? They swooped down closer and circled above us. It wasn't the angel of death, but they could fly. They had long fins with stretched out scales. Their necks were bent and they had sharp beaks. Maybe these were the creatures God was giving the world. They did dominate the skies. They landed around us. One hopped in front of us and spat out a line of questions. Who are you? What do you want? What are you doing here? We're fleeing from the angel of death, Sadet said. You too? I thought it was just a ziz, he says. God told us what's going to happen to us. Do you know? Has he told you? Yes, I said. The angel of death wants to destroy us so we won't be able to multiply. Oh, that's a shame. A real shame, the ziz said. We heard that this new creature is going to make something. It'll turn into an island, a big one, a whole continent of the stuff. It's going to be a thing we want to eat. Even though we shouldn't, we will. Most of us will choke to death. Some will live, some will make it. We'll be sick. Our eggs will be frail. We'll crush our babies. Then a bunch of them got worked up. They started screeching and flailing around. They caught that putrid scent on the wind before I did. The angel of death darted up the mountain, lancing Ziz by their wings. The fire from the hook spread over them, and they struggled and shrieked. Go! Get out of here! Leave! 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 But we can't go fast enough, Sadet said. There's a way through. A sneaky way. The Ziz motioned to the mountains. There! Go through there! Sure enough, there was a way through the mountains. It was a tight squeeze, but it was sheltered, and we were able to escape again. We found some rest in a forest on the side of the mountain. Sadet fell behind. Devgemi, I need to rest. What's wrong? I need to rest, she repeated and fell. Sadet! I'm fine, she said. She bit down. Her expression twisted. I coiled around her. It's all right. Don't leave me, she pleaded. I'm here, love. I'm not going anywhere. Her breathing became faster and labored. I didn't know what was wrong. She was hurt. Maybe she had been away from the water for too long. Did we doom ourselves to die? Was this God's plan the whole time? Then everything was still except for the wind. That's when I heard a faint crying. I thought it was Sadet, but it wasn't coming from her. She uncoiled, and there was a child. I expected him to be bigger. He's a little. Sadet had calmed down. Her breathing was steady. He'll grow. What should we name him, I asked. How about Yilin? Sadet suggested. I like it. I scooped up my son with my flipper. Welcome to the world, Yilin. Sadet rested her head against me. For the first time in a long time, the world seemed filled with unending love. We raised Yilin in the forest in secret. He was small, and I assumed he was sickly. But since he was born on land, he didn't have the kind of trouble Sadet and I had walking around. He was quick and agile. He scampered up trees and rocks like they were nothing. We came across a small pool, and he swam just as well. I thought of everything he could become. Maybe if he tried jumping out of the trees, his scales might become longer, and he could fly like the Ziz. I didn't want to bring the idea of him leaping out of trees to Sadet, though. I was amazed with how much potential our son had. Maybe Yilin would be able to compete with God's prized creature, whatever they may be. But our time together as a family didn't last for very long. I could smell the angel of death hovering over the trees. We had evaded him for so long, I had hoped that he had given up on the chase. I dug out a small hole in the dirt. I told Yilin to hide and wait there until I told him it was safe to come out. The angel of death slashed the trees away. Many fell by its blade, and others melted into molten puddles. Sadet and I were completely exposed, and there was nowhere to run. I pushed Sadet behind me. I thought I could keep her safe. If anything, I'd be able to stall the angel of death so she could get away. She'd be able to come back for Yilin later. The angel of death rushed at us. In a flash, it zipped past my head and squelched into something. I turned and saw a burning hook pierce through Sadet's cheek. She pulled away as the fire spread. She smacked at the burning with her flipper, but that only made the fire extend to her torso. A cord emerged from the angel of death and circled around her snout, pressing down her tongue. She shook violently. She couldn't breathe. Then Sedet's body went limp. The angel of death lifted her into the sky. I cried out, "She's dead! Leave her with me!" The angel of death paused and said, "God has plans for her." "What more can God want?" I asked. "God intends to salt her and keep her fresh, and then serve her as a meal for the righteous in the end of days." The righteous? How can a God who exterminates his creations have the right to call anything righteous? That's not for me to say. The angel of death lifted Sedet into the clouds, and they were gone. I uncovered Yilin. He was confused and wanted to know where Sedet was. I did my best to explain to him what God had told us, what the behemoth and the Ziz were destined to go through, and what the angel of death had said. I was shaking with rage. Yilin listened quietly. I saw that he shared my anger, and he asked, "What are we going to do to avenge them?" "I don't know," I said. "Have you ever seen this creature that God loves so much?" Yilin asked. "No." "Then let's go see it." I took Yilin to see what these creatures looked like. I needed to know what would swarm across the world. We wandered for days before we came across an oasis surrounded by trees and vines. We stayed low to the ground and found an opening to look inside. There were two creatures walking around on their back flippers. Attached to their upper body were two flippers like the angel of death. It made them twice as deadly. We watched them become one flesh. I assumed the one on top was the male. The best way to get back at God was by corrupting his prized creatures. If God was going to save Sedet for the righteous, then I was going to make sure that it would be a good long while before anyone could deserve to be called righteous. "Son, how can man drive out man?" "I'm not sure," Yilin said. I thought of Sedet and felt all the blood go to my face. If the humans oppose themselves, they are divided. They cannot stand. Their end will come. Go, Yilin. Cause a rift between these two. Tempt them with fruit that only God can eat. I hoisted my child over the wall. Yilin was clever. He got that from his mother. He'd figure out a way to corrupt these creatures and make them know our pain.
Yeah.